America. Hi, everybody. We're going to jump in here. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us today, this Saturday morning, for our first of 4 Brown Fatherhood series sessions. This is the 4th annual Brown Fatherhood series that we've done. And it's, if you're not familiar, if you haven't participated or seen some of the previous sessions, this is basically a space where we want to invite dads from the Latino community, Chicano community, Nativo community, to come and talk about what their experiences were like growing up and what it's like to navigate the challenges of fatherhood, being a brown dad, knowing that there are all kinds of different challenges that we face that are unique to our community, but also we'll talk about some of the parallels and how our challenges overlap with challenges from other spaces. And so I just want to remind everybody, once again, this is an interactive experience. So there's a chat section. Please drop any reflections, anything you want to share. If something really stands out to you that Jorge and I are discussing, please let us know in the chat so we can talk a little bit more about that. And if you have any questions, specific questions that you'd like Jorge or myself to address, please drop it in the Q&A section. We're going to take the last 10, 15 minutes or so, and any questions that people have, we'll address it right there. So just to kind of give you a sense of what these sessions are going to be about. We've done sessions in the past where, again, we talk about identity, we talk about culture, we talk about masculinity, we talk about raising children, family dynamics, all that. This year, in light of everything that we've seen happening in Gaza, we want to try to also make these connections and parallels to communities outside of Latino communities. So we have Palestinian brothers and sisters who are going through some tough times. We have Jewish community who's going through some tough times. We have a lot of different struggles that we see happening here domestically, but also we see the extremes of what's happening in Gaza and how that impacts families. So throughout this month, we'll have some conversations with people like Jorge. We have an ethnic studies professor next week. After that, we have Daniel Mate, the son of Gabor Mate, who's going to be joining us to talk a little about what his experience was like growing up with a dad like Gabor. And on the 27th, we have a session with Shukri Katan, who is of the Tia Foundation, and he comes from a Palestinian background, and their organization works with refugees from all over the world. So a lot of good conversations. Thank you all for joining us for this one. Please make sure that you tune in for the ones coming up as well. And with that, I wanted to introduce our guest today, Jorge Narvaez. He's a father of 3. He is a restorative justice practitioner. He also has a lot of content on his page here on on Instagram. You can find him at Reality Changers. And so I want to give you a little space to introduce yourself, Jorge. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about what your work entails and what brought you down this path that you're on?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Really, really happy to be here just to connect with you, connect with your community, connect with each other's communities. I think any opportunity we get a chance to talk about our story, and I'll make a point out of that is very special. We all get a chance to share each other's stories and where we've been and what we've done. And being a father of 3 for me has been an incredible journey of learning and unlearning. And it's been just like a roller coaster of growth and ups and downs. And very grateful to have kids, very grateful to be able to provide and to learn and getting into this journey of fatherhood, getting into this journey of content creation, getting into this journey of being a restorative justice practitioner. It really stems from one thing. It stems from, how do we help others tell their story? How do we help others share their story and listen to their story? And over the years, going on social media, on YouTube, and traveling the world and getting an opportunity to witness and expose my story and share and listen to other people's stories, and then coming back to the community, coming back to the city, coming back to kind of boots on the ground work, and getting into the schools, working with students, working with teachers. It's kind of the same narrative, man. It's kind of the same thing. How do we help others tell their story, right? And it just makes me really happy to be able to provide that space. So I'm very happy to be here for that reason.
Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, and I definitely feel like what you were saying about the importance of giving people time to tell their story. And that's part
Yes.
of the reason that we do these sessions is we don't have, I know for myself as a dad growing up, I didn't really have a chance to talk to other dads about what their story was like and how they navigate all this. And
Yeah,
again, part of the reason that we want to do this is so that we can share our stories. People can resonate with the kind of things that maybe we've experienced, and they don't feel so alone. They can potentially take some of the wisdom that we want to offer here, but then also we're going to learn from each other. That's how the community works, right? We learn from each other's stories, and people learn from our stories.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and so I want to kind of open up with that. Part of the way that I look at exploring people's stories is I feel like a lot of people are very set on understanding who they are today and trying to work on who they want to become. But I feel like it's really important to really reflect on how we got here first. And
Right.
so can you just talk a bit about what it was your upbringing like? What were some of the early experiences that you had that you feel like shaped the person that you were leading up to you becoming a father? So like, kind of that period of life between your birth up to I ain't a dad yet. What was that like for you?
Every time I get approached with this question, my brain instantly goes to a trauma, but it and finding a way to redirect the trauma and making it something positive, right? I was 2 years old, and I remember I was allowed to just kind of wander, and it was one of the earliest memories of my life, right? One of the earliest memories of my life, and I witnessed domestic violence growing up, and I witnessed something that I saw was not okay, right? It was something that was going on between my mom and dad. There was a lot of it was an intense moment, um, and I remember how scared I was. I remember how scared I was to see my mom being scared, right? And uh, looking back at my past and those moments of trauma, but also goodness, figuring out how to be a person, how to be a niño, how to practice my inner child, right? And being surrounded by by alcohol, by drugs, I used to live in East LA. I used to live in Highland Park, right? And this place called El Hoyo, and El Hoyo means the hole.
Hmm.
And so uh, whenever this question comes in, I always remember that. I always remember what it was like to live that like that. And I remember so many vivid moments of intensity. And I was wondering, why am I living like this? Why is it so intense? Right? Um, el tiempo pasa. I became a teen dad, you know.
Mm.
I became a teen dad. Looking back at the reason why I probably became a teen dad is because, you know, I wanted to escape the reality that I was living. I was living in a garage, and with my stepbrothers and sisters, and I wanted to find a way to build my own family. I think that was the subconscious concept, and going into it not knowing what was going to happen, I became a dad, dude. It was scary.
Hmm.
um and I got to see my daughter born, Alexa, and I was 17 when she was born. And it was a beautiful moment. It was also very scary, dude. It was really, really scary because I was also undocumented at the time. So I was like, man, like you got left to right telling me, you got to start working, you got to start doing this. And I'm over here
Hmm.
like, dude, I want to go to college. I want to do this. I want to do this. I'm in the academic space. I love to learn. So like, I was like, how do I do both? How do I figure this out? And so, long story short, it was like me puse las pilas kind of attitude. I went full survival mode, dude. I went full survival mode, and I started I graduated from high school. I was the first person in my entire family to graduate from high school, and middle school as well. I got into college. I got into UC San Diego. I moved in on campus, and it was the first time I've ever had my own room, dude. Ever. And so I'm over here undocumented. I'm over here living on campus in this like really rich area, right? And like a complete culture shock, complete culture shock. And the first year at UCSD, I remember as I navigated fatherhood, I had to go through calculus. I had to go through all these prerequisites, right, for the major. And I remember like drowning, dude, that first year, right? Figuring out how to be a dad and how to be at the time, I was trying to figure out a way to be present, and at the same time dealing with all this stuff that I lived like between the ages of 2 and 17, right? Um, and and figuring out a way to be a person. Uh,
Hmm.
and and then I ended up graduating from UC San Diego. I was the first person in my entire family to graduate from college. And then by the time I graduated, I already had two kids. I had Eliana and Alexa. And that's when around that time, that's when a video went viral. And then I ended up on YouTube. We started blogging, It was insane. Started traveling, started doing some crazy stuff about fatherhood and advocating for fatherhood, advocating about family, community, art, and music. But it really, again, it really came down to one thing, and I wanted to go back to it. It's like, how can I continue telling my story to people? How can I continue helping others to tell their story? You know, and by sharing mine in a way where I'm being honest, I'm being real, I'm focusing on what's happening around me, and being cognizant, and being like open-minded about it, and just like um storytelling, you know. So um I realized fatherhood is it's a non-linear journey. It's a
Mm-hmm.
non-linear journey. Now, I shared a little bit about boop, 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 right, all these little things that happen, but the way that I shape my memory now is looking back at it as a spiral, dude. Like, so if I was here, right, like at the beginning, at 17, and I go around and I start going around, then let's say 5, 6, 10, 7 years later, I revisit that same spot in a deeper level. And I realized looking back, that um, it was it made me who I am now, dude. It made me who I am now, and what I do in my sacred purpose, and what I do in the schools, and what I do in on social media, and what I do with my kids, right? And just learning to be present while navigating the past, which is like la trauma, las cosas que
Mm-hmm.
han pasado en la vida, the difficult things of life, right? But also the goodness of life. But remembering that my story is very important. But if my story is very important, so are my kids' stories. And if my kids' stories are very important, so are my friends' stories and everybody else's stories. I'm like, how do we honor each other's stories? How do we honor the way we live? And how do we honor where we're going? And I grew up in a neighborhood, bro, where like a lot of us would say, hey, where you from? Where you from? Where you from?
Mm-hmm.
East LA, right? Highland Park, highly gentrified, by the way, already. But um, but back then it was like lowriders on Figueroa all the time. You know what I mean? And now people always say, "Hey, where you from?" I was like, "Man, And then it's not just about where you're from. It's really thinking about where you're going. And that's what I think fatherhood helped me understand is, okay, where the hell am I going with all this? Why am I doing all this?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And my kids get older. My daughter's 19 years old, bro. She's 19 years old now. And my second is 15. And my son is 6. And I realized that this little spiral that I created, right, revisiting certain past and certain moments, they're also navigating too. And so I'm watching them, witnessing them at the same age when I was 19 and when I was 15 and when I was 6 years old. And I have a very vivid memory of those stages. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I remember being 6 and asking those type of questions. I remember being 6 and being insecure about who I was. I remember being 15 and feeling like I wasn't enough. I remember when I was 19 and I was drowning. I'm like, man, okay, so how can I now look back, dude, as 37-year-old father with 3 kids, and check on my kids and go, okay, they're in those moments, they're in those stages. How can I support their story at those moments?
Mm-hmm.
And because I also provided those memories for them. So how do I teach? How do I show up to them in those moments in life? And I realized I just got to continue being honest and being present and practicing some of the stuff that I preach, dude. Because it's una cosa es decir las cosas. One thing is saying the things, and another thing is like actually practicing it. You know, so um, that's where I am right now, dude. I'm like in a space right now where I'm revisiting a lot of my morality, a lot of my ideological perspectives, a lot of my sense of perception and my sense of reality. And I'm looking back at my kids. I'm going, oh crap, my daughter's 19 years old. She's in college. She's going through midterms and finals. I remember that what I was like. So she'll come up to me and ask me about like she's taking ethnic studies, she's taking religious studies, she's taking business, and she's learning about she wants to learn how to build business. And I was like, how can I help that story, dude? How can I help her? Because I didn't get any help I didn't have anybody to help me when I was 19, when I was 15, when I was 6 years old, dude. My dad and my mom were always fighting, and my dad was always involved with drugs, and he was always, and I mean, I love my dad now, and we have a better relationship than we did before. But you know, lo que pasó era muy real para mí. It was very real what I saw. So I had no other choice, man. I don't have any other choice now but to really uh to observe, and I can't look away because I I want my kids to feel like that they're loved. you know,
Mhm.
and that's kind of like where I'm at right now. You know, I'm trying to figure out how to be more present. Sorry, stay out of my head. You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, dang, a lot to unpack right there, man. Yeah, because I
Oh
think,
yeah,
I think again, the central focus is like the story, right? And what you were sharing right now about how, seeing your kids go through similar stages, similar phases, and just trying to reflect on what was my story like then, and how do I want to support them so that their story is a positive one when they're reflecting back. And
yeah.
so I wonder if you could kind of just unpack a little bit of like really focusing in on what were some of those early stories for you, and how did those stories kind of, because again, you say you were a teen dad trying to escape from whatever it was that you were experiencing at home or in your family. Again, I'd like you to kind of share a little bit about what was going on at home in those years, 1 to 17, where you felt like you didn't have that support, or maybe you didn't have the love that you wanted to see in your family. What did that look like for you? And
Witnessing my
actually, let me
dad's.
add let me add on a hopeful note on that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's also the people that were there, and the people that were there to help guide us and support us and offer that love and attention that we're craving. So again, kind of hitting on both of those points. What were some of those dark moments that you felt like had a significant impact, that trauma, but also where were those moments of hope for you?
Looking back at it now, going back to like revisiting that space again with a different mindset and a different lens, dude. Like now that I'm 37, because I answered this question when I was 20, right? And I answered this question when I was 30. But I'm answering it differently now at 37 because I realized that there was a ray of hope. I realized that even though my dad was struggling with alcohol and he was struggling with like substance abuse, he really tried to be there, man. I have memories where like he would take me fishing with him, and I have memories between like cuando tenía como like 4 or 5 years old, 6, 7 years old, that they're coming back to me as I teach my son, as I teach my kids, and I began to remember, man, my dad really wanted to be there, but he was struggling on the inside with his own inner battles, with his own wounded inner child, with his own story. And guess what? Nobody was helping him, dude. Nobody was helping him because at the time, and even now, dude, a lot of men, a lot of fathers don't have space. That we don't have space that is being held for us so we can like decompress and like your cachucha, decolonize our minds, and figure out a way for my dad to be present, but he had no other choice, dude. So he had to. I could see he was because he was always an intelligent man, very very very. He's a genius. But when you combine that with trauma and substance abuse,
Hmm.
it's hard. So looking back at that, that was my ray of hope going, oh my God, like, okay, yeah, my dad and my mom weren't getting along. Yeah, my dad was, he's a jeweler. He's a great, great jeweler, one of the best that I can think of. Right. And that was his like therapy. Like I would see him work from home and he would use his hands in a way where like I could see his muscles like strengthen as he was bending the metal and he was creating the diamonds. And I remember how much effort he would make, right? And then he would use all that energy just to force himself to make things. And I was like, man, my dad is really not just bending the metal. He's really taking it out on it. Se está desahogando. It was so his job was his therapy, you know? And so watching him going, okay, this is his coping mechanism. He's really trying to figure out how to take this coping mechanism away. So witnessing that growing up, and not understanding it, right? Being resentful, being angry, being like, where was my dad? Oh, woe is me. And it's true, man. We have a lot of kids in our community que no tienen papás and moms that are present because they're struggling with themselves, but also they're struggling with a community that doesn't see them the way that they should, right? So and that's what I learned, dude. I was like, man, well, how can I find spaces? How can I look for spaces now presently, and this is in the past 15, 20 years, right? How can I help myself to not just repeat that history, repeat those cycles, but de veras, en serio, o sea, break that chain. Be that transitional character in my family. Be the first person in my entire family to go to high school and college and graduate, right? And really um, transition this space of grief that my family got into, and then getting out and helping them see sidescape. We need to break this chain. And now my daughter's in college. My Liana's she's a freshman in varsity soccer. My son is 6 years old, super desmadroso, but he's really intelligent, dude, really smart. So I'm over here like, how can I cultivate these things, right? having people around them that love them, that care for them, and being honest about the work that I got to do on the inside, man. Like being really honest about, every time I revisit that loop, every time I revisit memories, it's a different lesson, and I pay attention to these symbols. I pay attention to the things around us. Um, and to this day, dude, there's still a lot of parts of me that I still have to work on, because I'm still telling my story.
Mhm. Yeah, when you mentioned, the fact that there's a lot of kids who don't have uh, people who are there to be supportive and chill. I grew up without a dad myself. My dad got deported to Mexico around the time I was 3 years old. And
Mm,
so, for me, one of the challenges was looking for, it was subconscious, it was an unconscious thing, just looking for male role models because the man who would have been there to kind of set that example wasn't there for me. So I think that's something I wanted to ask you too, is like when we're men growing up trying to figure out who we are and what we want to do, we look to the examples around us to see this is what masculinity looks like. This is what relationships with women look like. This is how we
yeah.
carry ourselves out in public. So for you, who were some of those early examples of what it's like to be a guy, and what were some of the lessons that they taught you,
My
whether
mom, dude.
implicitly or explicitly? Go
My
on.
mom, dude. My mom. And the reason why is because when my dad stepped out of being a dad because he was so busy with it, my mom got divorced and they separated because domestic violence got so bad. My mom had to step into that role. She had to step into the masculine and the feminine, And so she had to do both. And so I had to learn through her story and the things that she was going through and the things she was teaching us to survive. And she was undocumented too, so it wasn't just like she was doing it because she was also trying to figure out a way to also survive. And being undocumented in any country is difficult, and so I saw what it was like for a person to struggle and survive. She ended up getting deported too, bro. She was actually deported in 2017, 2007, 2017, and she got apprehended. She was put in. Dude, this is a whole issue too. You said that, and I immediately went into that because she was one of the mujeres that was like being transported in the caravans that were coming from Tijuana, and they were being. She got se entregó, and she got arrested. They put her in jail for like 2 months, and we were trying to get her out because she was seeking asylum you know and so the reason why I'm telling you that is because she never gave up. She's always tried to find a way to come back and reconnect with us, right? And so and it was really hard to see her, because dude, imagine the matriarch of your family being deported, dude, being
Mm-hmm.
taken away from from the space where you're learning. Imagine being separated. Imagine being this completely taken away from someone you love, dude, like that. And so that's what I saw and I witnessed. And I was like, well, this is the mother that's teaching me how to be a father. This is the mother that's teaching me how to be a man. This is the mother that's teaching me how to be a better person. Right. And then when I began to revisit my father and I began to revisit other male role models in my life throughout between the ages of 1 to like even now, right? The círculo, the men in the community, the support, the people in my family and the people that my loved ones around me that hold me accountable of my palabra, you know, those men, right? And shout out to the National Compadres Network for that, right? Shout out to the Círculo de Hombres for that, and I've been part of them. I've been part of their work for more than 15 years, dude. I've been going out there for like freaking 15 years, sweat lodging and being part of their community, dude, and learning and unlearning, dude, to have like moral courage to keep going and intellectual courage and spiritual courage to not give up on myself and to really define qué tipo de hombre quiero ser yo.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of man I want to be, what kind of person I want to be. And I don't want to stick. I don't want to. I don't want to think about. There's always this concept of these binary concepts, right? But like this concept of nurturing, right? This concept of nurturing is really important. It's a very universal concept. And so I think that as I began to learn better about myself, I began to realize that what being a father really truly means is you got to nurture yourself and nurture others.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, dang, okay. I wanted to talk about some of the things that you mentioned with all that. I want to come back to the círculo because I definitely feel like that's something that more people need to understand is the importance of having that community and having space where you can talk to other folks and, like you said, nurture who it is you are, who it is you want to be. I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of come back to because one of the things that we talked about when we checked in earlier this week was the importance of emphasizing the role of women. And, so when I was asking you who are some examples early on, I wasn't expecting you to throw your mom out. I know for me as well, growing up with a single mom, she stepped up in a lot of ways to make sure that me and my brothers had everything we needed. But I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned where you said that she stepped up in the feminine and the masculine way. So can you spell out for our audience here, what do you mean when you say that she stepped up in the masculine and the feminine? What does that look like? What does the spectrum of that look like for you?
And again, I wanted to be mindful of that concept is a very binary concept, right?
Hmm.
Um, and because the way that I want to describe my mom is a person of power, right? That reminded me that that we have to keep going, echarle ganas, right? When my mom left my dad, we moved back to Mexico and we lived in Guadalajara and we lived in Mexico City, dude. And it was very difficult. Ella los dejaba, she would leave us in the house by ourselves for a long time so she can go to work, dude. She used to work at this restaurant called Veeps in Mexico City. And she was taking buses back and forth. And it was like, dude, I saw a person that wanted to make sure we were okay. And I was like, I don't understand. I don't know if that's a feminine or masculine concept, right? But the concept of survival is what I saw in this person. And because my dad wasn't around because he had his issues, and that's it's understandable. My mom had to step into that role, the role that my dad couldn't provide at the time, and she had to step in. She had to step in to teach me different sets of morality, right? I'm pretty sure my mom even tapped into some of the stuff that she had to learn new things. She had to unlearn, right? So she can teach me how to be a good person, right? Before being a man, be a good person, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but so I think that's what I mean by that. Like my mom and people like my mom figures and father figures, right? The father, because it wasn't just my mom. There was like, I had mentors growing up, right? I had nonprofits I was a part of. I had like support systems, right? Counseling, right? I had people around me, male figures, female figures, non-binary figures, dude, all kinds of figures, dude, that like they say, hey, échale ganas, this is what it's like to survive. This is what it means to be a man. And in the círculo, when going back to the círculo, you know, is that's where I learned a lot more of the internal inner child stuff. When I started witnessing 80-year-olds crying, I started witnessing 70, 60, 50, 40, a bunch of people from 7 generations behind us and 7 generations ahead of us. They were like describing stuff that they witnessed. I'm like, man, I'm not alone, dude. I'm
Hmm.
not alone with this experience. There's many Latinos, there's many Chicanos, there's many people all over the world, dude, that were disenfranchised, that still need to work on their decolonization of their mind, to understand who they are. And I think that's why I'm conscious. I'm more conscious of other people's other people's spirals. I'm conscious of other people's experiences, and it helps me empathize with people. It helps me understand people's stories. Like todo lo que está pasando in the Middle East, todo lo que está pasando en diferentes países, todo lo que está pasando all these other places. I'm like, man, like I understand it at a different level now. You know, so it just broadened it expanded my horizons in the way that I love, in the way that I want to live, and in the way that I want to die, dude.
Hmm.
Legacy. I think
Legacy.
that's what I'm trying to say.
Sorry, I'm absorbing just a lot of the stuff you were saying there. Yeah, I think bringing it back to what we opened with, stories, the importance of stories. And what I'm hearing from what you were sharing right now is, there's the story of your mom who, because your dad wasn't around in the way that you would have wanted him to
Yeah.
be, her story is the story of a woman who had to step up and make sure that you guys were okay. And also a woman who had to survive for herself, just with all the struggles that come with that, right? Not just looking out for you, but like, how do I make sure I'm good? And sometimes I know, again, similar experience, similar experience with my mom, growing up with a single mom. I saw she put a lot of herself aside because she's just like, I need to make sure that my boys are all right. She didn't go out on dates. She didn't go clubbing. She didn't do none of that. She was like, I'm gonna go work. I'm gonna come home, make some food, make sure my boys are all set. Um, but then also the part about just the stories and the examples from all these different mentors that you had and how that was expressed, and how you absorb that. And you see that you're not alone. When you see other people are kind of sharing their stories, and like, okay, you're also hurting that way, or you're also grown in this way, and all those kinds of things. Um, can you talk a little bit about who are some of those mentors for you growing up? Like you said, you were part of different nonprofits and that you were engaging in these different círculos. Like, can you just Leslie's always talking about the importance of uh, paying
Hmm.
homage to our maestros, people who helped
Hell yeah.
shape who we are. So, can you just talk a little about who are some of your maestros growing up that helped you along this journey?
Man, I mean, right now the one that I instantly think of is Maestro Macedonio Arteaga, right? From Iscali, and the way that he led us to really believing in ourselves, right? And people in my life, certain teachers in middle school, right? Certain individuals, like not just my mom, right? Certain tios, right? Certain tios that gave me that wisdom. They're like, "Hey, mijo, cómo estás?" Like, and like I would just tell them like, "Hey, like, yeah, I fell in love and this," and like when I was in need of like support with advice with love, or like I was in need of supportive advice for um like what do I want to do in my life, those big questions where you kind of like you end up in like, oh, what do I do, like crossroads questions where you end up in the middle and like ¿qué hago kind of moments.
Hmm.
And I remember feeling I had the support systems. I just got to tap into it, talk to my tío, talk to my mom, go to the founding member of Reality Changers, a nonprofit that I'm a founding member of. It's called his name was Christopher Yanov. He's one of the ones that also helped me too, man. That guy was like, it was a program. Initially, it was an anti-gang program,
Hmm.
but it transitioned more into a program for the youth, first generation high school students going into college, called Reality Changers. The name of my channel, the name of my YouTube channel, the name of Instagram, and in that space, same concept. That space held space for individuals like me, first generation high school students, even middle school, first generation high school, first generation everything pretty much. And we would sit down in the back of a church, dude, and then just like talk about like our highs of the week and our lows of the week and just have a space to have dialogue, so that, right? And then yo le seguí, and I know I started getting involved with like stuff in school. I started getting involved with clubs at the school. I started realizing, man, like I'm pretty happy around people. I'm pretty happy hearing other people's stories. I feel good when I'm able to learn. So me metí en programas. I got into programs. I started asking more questions. I got really curious, right? Um, and um, and those people, man, like my mom, like Macedonio, like Christopher Yanov, ahorita Maestro Jerry Tello from the National Compadres Network, who oversees like a huge project, right? With like with a brown, like with like being a brown father, like Chicano fathers, la cultura cura kind of concept, right? And so people like them, right, and other individuals in the circulo and other individuals outside of that community too, that are supportive. I could even say my neighbor, dude. Like my neighbor, dude, is a great man. He's a great man. He's a solid father, right, with good morals, right? What can I learn from him? So like that's kind of why I became more curious about other people's perspectives, other people's stories, other people's ideological views. I see what I can learn to really learn how the world really works.
Hmm.
So I didn't want to get all dogmatic with things. You people get dogmatic with like religion and culture. Like, people get really immersed in like their views, and they forget about how other people
Hmm.
live. And guess what causes that? And guess what happens after that? It causes violence, bro. It causes pain. It causes a ridiculous amount of detachment of reality.
Hmm.
So that's why I was like, okay, how do I balance all this? Pues entonces I'm like, okay, stay open-minded, because guess what? I still gotta go home and I gotta teach these kids what I learned and prepare them for what's coming, for what's happening. The world is changing. We got AI coming in. We got, all kinds of technology coming in, but the concept's still the same, bro. The concept never changes. How do we continue telling our story?
Hmm. I think something you touched on right there about how people forget that other people's lives are very different. And sometimes when we aren't telling our stories, it becomes easy to Leslie and I have been talking about this a lot since what's happening in Gaza. It's just a dehumanization. We just look at what's on the exterior, we look at what's presented, we look at what we are observing, and we just make a determination versus sitting down with that person, hearing their story, understanding where is this coming from, what I'm seeing here on the surface. Um, so I think that's something else. And when you mentioned that, you don't even need to look to some mentor who's leading a massive organization that's doing good work. You can look to your neighbor and just look to the example that they're setting. I know that that's something that here in Santana we're really trying to build is just the local community. the person next door to you is someone that has something to offer in terms of wisdom, personal experience, things like that.
And not just, and let's say you're like, man, I'm antisocial. I don't want to go meet new people. All right, fine. Look at certain books, right? Look at certain. You know who I look up to a lot? It's so ironic. I was thinking about it. I was like, what's a good male figure I look up to? Goku, from Dragon Ball. Like even that simple concept of
Because how
like
he
what
eats
it's
the
like
rice
to
real fast.
to never give up, right? The concept of never giving up, right?
Mhm.
And like there's so many ways to learn nowadays, different ways to absorb that I'm like we just have to choose to see other people for who they really are, you
Mhm.
know um and touching on that concept of like the whole the dehumanization concept, right? Like that's a big deal, man. That's a really big deal. If you're dehumanizing something or someone or a country or a people or a whole population, dude, and you have the power to press a button to destroy, that's like what do you do with someone? What do you do with someone's morality and ideological perspective when you're so detached from humanity that and you have so much power to just destroy so many stories? What does that say about you? What does that say about how you view the world? But like, I don't want to go on another tangent because my ADHD brain wants to talk about 1,000 things. I'm
Word, I
thinking
get.
Attack on Titan. I'm thinking like a bunch of stuff. But
Now, I think something you mentioned, like you don't need to just yeah, that's the Leslie and the chatter going on about how fine Goku is since you dropped. That's the goals right there. Get the pecs like Goku. I can't get the hair though. Yeah, the hair. I
yeah,
can't get the hair. It's not a three-dimensional hairstyle. I'm sorry. Uh, but
it's not.
but something you mentioned about just looking to places to see people's stories. Like you can go to books, you can go on programs, movies. But I think something, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, being that you have social media on Instagram and YouTube where you talk about these things. Can you talk a little bit about how the social media community has helped? Because I know for us, again, Leslie's been very, very public about her stance on Palestine over these last 3 months. And in being so open and upfront, we've found community of others who feel strongly about this, who feel like they are happy that someone's speaking out because now they have the vocabulary to speak out themselves. So, can you talk a little bit about how social media has helped you find community or what you've learned from interacting with people online?
Dude, when my mom got deported, I went to social media and I started raising awareness, right? I started finding a way to. I'm gonna start with that story first because it instantly came into my mind. Like, and it's funny how I always go back to my mom, right? It just goes to show how influential mujeres can be in your life, right? And when she got deported and she got apprehended, I went to social media and asked for help, dude. I asked for help. I was like, hey, how do we get this? How do we figure this out? And there was a couple of nonprofits that I connected to, and they saw us, right? Dude, I got so far to influence what was going on with my mom that we got a chance to meet the president of the United States because of it, because of social media, dude. Because we started writing petitions, we started raising awareness. We got on Telemundo, we got on Univision, but you started talking about. I started using my platform like the way you guys are using it, the way that you guys are using it to raise awareness about a topic, right? Yeah, you're gonna make people uncomfortable. Yeah, you're gonna make people want to unsubscribe. Yeah, you're gonna make people do this and that. But guess what, dude? I wanted to get my mom out of freaking prison.
Mm-hmm.
Una mujer that has never committed a crime in a freaking life, dude. Being dehumanized with shackles and an orange or green, I forget it was an orange or green jumpsuit. How easy society unplugs from the concept of like how they plug into the concept of dehumanization, and how I saw my mom becoming dehumanized for choosing to survive. For not like she didn't come to this country to take your candy or to take your money, dude. She just wanted to survive, right? And the way that we somehow the way that the world manipulates that story, right? And I walk into the prison and I see my mom in a jumpsuit, right? I'm over like, what? Why does it? That doesn't make any sense. Why? You know? But that's when I realized because of social media. I realized because of the support that and the support. They also social media also helped me raise money. They helped me raise money to help her release her in the bond. You know, eventually my mom did get out. We got her to become a permanent resident. She ended up with breast cancer, and it was really difficult. There's a whole documentary my mom about about her immigrant voice,
What's the
and
documentary
you
called?
know, it's called Immigrant Voices of America, and just look it up. It's just look Esther Alvarado, Immigrant Voices of America. And it's a hell of a story, dude. A hell of a story of survival, not oh we came here. No, it's literal survival, right? And and social media was able to somehow find a way to provide help for my mom, and it wasn't just them, it was my community too, dude. My community helped me out, dude. They helped me raise money, the local community too. That's one story, right? I think another way social media helped me, right, with YouTube. When I was on YouTube, I'm not really active as much on YouTube anymore. I am going to go back, but right now I'm really focusing on some of the work I'm doing locally. And I was able to travel to China. I was able to travel to Australia. I was able to advocate in different places I never ever thought I would ever go to, right? And continue telling my story in a certain way and attracting certain communities, attracting certain people into my life that also changed my life. There's people that follow me on my Facebook, on my Instagram page, that have been following me for more than 12 years, bro. They're like, they have kids. Some of them have kids named after my kids, you know and like and they're so devoted and so dedicated, and I'm thinking like, that's beautiful, man. That's a community as well. I might not see them in person, but man, like they're so dedicated to learning just as much as I am. So I think that's what I see in what you guys are doing with like this Latinx parenting, and what you guys are doing currently right now. You guys made a complete shift towards raising awareness on one of the most important situations happening in the world, right? This crazy, drastic genocide that is happening, right? And the way that children are being treated, women are being treated, and like, how do we show our audience? How do we show people? How do we show, hey man, what's going on? Why is this happening? Even if they can't do anything about it, raise awareness about it, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's what social media has been able to do for me, is to teach me, but also raise awareness to help others.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think we can go on and on about all the different ways because you've been doing this for a while, you say. Like, you got people following you for 12 years. I'm sure there's a bunch of stories that we could dig into there. I did want to hit on, when you mentioned just for LP, for Leslie, how, shifting gears. I don't know if I would constitute it as shifting gears because, like Leslie's dropping in the chat here, the message for our page at least has always been all children are our children, and that we want to
Yeah.
value kids regardless of where they're coming from. And then just seeing, what is it? There's a quote from Fred Hampton Jr. who said, brutal realities call for brutal terms. And, it's sort of
Mm,
just looking at what's happening right now in Gaza is it's not time for business as usual when we're using our platform to uplift these stories. And we know sometimes it's going to be a little uncomfortable, like you said, and we're going to turn some people off. But it's important to address the reality of what's happening with the terms and the language that's appropriate for the severity, the brutality of all that. Um,
yeah. And that's just you're just being nice about it, because it's a much more serious thing. Much more serious thing, right? To a moral level, right? As well. And it's a all children are sacred, bro. And I think that's what we need to figure out. I think you're right. That's the way that I resonate with the content you guys have been creating, not just recently, for the past couple of years. It's We have to acknowledge that all children are sacred. All of them, all kinds, all religious views, all ideological views. Even the animal world, bro, even the children of the animals, right? Even them, right? Like, we have to acknowledge that they are sentient beings, that are trying to figure out a way to survive. What kind of malicious intentions do the children have to deserve to be brutalized like that in any situation, ideologically, physically, and morally brutalized, you know and causing generational trauma 7 generations ahead, dude? Do you have any idea how bad that is? To like the stuff we're seeing is going to affect 7 generations of this.
mhm,
So, and that's children, dude. That's children. That's us. That's our future.
mhm. Yeah, and to kind of bring it back to, some of the things we were talking about earlier, I know you mentioned, like, when I look at what's happening right now, I think a lot of that comes down to, and Leslie and I have been having a lot of conversations about this. A lot of it comes down to just the sort of colonial mindset, colonial practices, oppressive systems that have shaped people's worldview to where they can tolerate these kinds of things, see them as acceptable. And I know you mentioned earlier that when you are doing the work and you're out there talking to folks, I know we see it too, that there's a lot of work, ourselves included, that still is necessary for people to decolonize the mindset, to decolonize their worldview. So I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about two things. Like, number one, what are some of the practices? First, can we articulate what do we mean when we say decolonize your mindset? And then number two, what are some of the practices that you and the groups that you're running, the circles of men, what are some practices that you do to work towards that end?
When I hear the word decolonize, I mean, I know that some people get a little heated about it, right? Uh, and they immediately relate it to something that they might not align with. But if I want to welcome people to really think about this word in a different way. And if there's a synonym or some sort of way to describe it, I would say deconstruct, unlearn, relearn, revisit, right? Reassess, reflect. I mean, anything with the word re, just go back and see again what happened, what you did. I think that's how I describe that term. What was the second question?
The second question was if we're talking about decolonizing as unlearning, sorry, restoring, someone drop it in the chat, reprogramming the ways that we're looking at things. What are some of the like tangible practices that you and the men that you're working with, what do you all do to try to decolonize your minds?
Do we listen to each other? That's all we do. We actively listen to each other. Where we're in círculo, bro, when we're talking, when we're dialogue, we don't judge. We don't give any advice. We don't ask each other any questions. We just listen to each other's story. And that concept of listening, just the simple primitive concept of listening, and there's a difference between listening and active listening, right? I'm going to focus on active listening and reflective listening and effective listening, which is something that I teach in the schools, right? And it really helps some kids and even some teachers really feel present, is listening to each other. And going, for example, like just last week I was in Círculo, and we were in the Centro Cultural de Raza, and we had a big old circle, and I was just listening to some of these folk, and there's elders in there. And so one of the elders was talking about how he's been sober for more than 30 years, right? And what he's learned from it, right? He's so proud, right? What can we learn from that story? Sober doesn't mean anything but courage as well. What can you learn from that? Someone stepping up and saying something that they're proud of, right? And so listening is what I think helps decolonize our minds. Active listening, reflective listening, listen to people's story, listen to what's really happening, going, how am I affected by this? How can I support? Or how can I learn from this? You know? And so just being open-minded about learning, dude, it's really like it's less about like my view is better than yours, and this is the way, and Mandalorian, this is the way. I love that show, by the way. But like, it's about just listening, you know, something that I suck at. I sucked at it growing up, dude. I sucked at listening,
Well,
and I
I wanted to talk
realized
about
that
that. Sorry, I
yeah,
wanted to talk about it because I hear you. It is important to listen. What is it about growing up that made us suck at listening? What do you think was kind of creating that block in the first place for you growing up?
the noise in my mind, the insecurities in my mind, trying to listen to respond instead of listening. Um, Growing up, how listening was modeled to me. I have memories of some of they're cool memories, but also memories that were also difficult. Was like I saw a bunch of people, tios and cousins and tias, hanging out, tanan pisteando, drinking, talking to each other, venting to each other, crying sometimes, singing, especially when the guitar, we'll jam out, right? Um, and I remember that's what I was. That's what it was. It was like, like just being what it really comes down to is learning, like recognizing that not everybody was present growing up. And since I didn't have a lot of people around me that were present, what else was I learning? You know? So like that, I don't know if I'm answering the questions in a way where like it appeals towards a specific way, but I'm trying to answer the questions in a general tangent way, because of the way that we perceive, everyone perceives our past differently. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I hear you. I think what you were saying about recognizing that people around you weren't present. And you can't listen if you're not present. If you're sitting in front of somebody and thinking about what you're going to be doing in the next hour, or who's winning the game because I'm not watching it right now. If you're in that space, then you're not actively listening. If you're not actively listening, you're not absorbing the lessons that you have to learn from the person in front of you. So hearing what you're saying about people early on not being present, and then the sort of contrast of when you would see people be open and vulnerable and present. In our community, sometimes that's when we're doing things that aren't the healthiest, like getting drunk in the backyard and just trying to numb our feelings away. But then we blast the music and we let the tears out and we're singing along. But that's when you're present, and
And,
that's when the
and there's nothing wrong
floodgates
with
open.
that, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with crying because unfortunately, some people in our community, bro, like even my dad, right? Like, hay unos que les falta, some of them are not there yet to address their pain and sometimes they need a coping mechanism to get it out and it sucks. I'll never forget right before my grandma died, I went to visit my dad. I went to Guadalajara and he told me this. He's like he was sober when I was over there, right? And he's always had trouble drinking. Um, but he was honest with me. He told me straight up, he's like, man, like, antes de que llegues, before you got here, I was thinking of drinking just because I want to start letting stuff out. He's like, he admitted to me that the only way he could get his emotions out is when he started drinking, you know? Can you imagine being a person, right? And I know a lot of us know a lot of people in our lives, I've experienced substance abuse as well, right? And what it really takes to be present when someone's hurting on the inside like that, when they're relying on things like that. And that's something that like it's ongoing with some people's lives, and I'm not judging because it's like I had a chance to also work in at a facility where fathers were coming out of prison, and I was these guys were coming out from prison. Some of them were coming out after 30 years, 10 years, some of them for a year. And like you get all these men, right? And I was in a bungalow, bro, and I was like sitting there like, why walk in and todo ahí vestido? I'm like, man, how the hell am I gonna earn these fools respect? These fools are like institutionalized mentally. They're in survival mode. How do I help these folk like be present? How do I help these folk in general? Who am I to come into their lives, right?
Mhm.
And so I walk in, and the first thing I think about is like, man, this feels like I'm in a room with my tios. Like
Mhm.
they're playing baraja right now. They're playing dominoes. Like I'm like, I feel good here because I feel like I'm back home, you know? And so when I began to empathize with that space and humanize those individuals that were coming out of prison and see them for who they really are, who they want to be, dude, like I learned from them what it means to be a man. I learned from them what it takes to be a man. And I saw struggles, dude. I saw them struggling. I saw some of them withdrawing in my class, and I saw them hurting. So that just tells me how much is happening in our community, but not just that, how much is happening on the inside to us, dude. How much
Mhm.
of that internal trauma is happening. Something that I deal with on a daily basis. I'm pretty sure you got something going on. I'm sure a lot of us have cargas that we have to let go of. The key is to listen to ourselves to let it go. A veces no se puede, but you gotta try, you know?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I know when you're talking about like working with men in the prisons here in Santana, there's an organization that I've worked with before, just like as kind of they do a boxing club. It's called Neutral Ground, and the boxing
mm,
club is for everybody. It's kids as young as 3 years old, and you got grandpas there running around. But a lot of the men from this group are men who have been formerly incarcerated, men who have struggled with substance abuse, and there's this stigma in our society when you see men like that. You see them as potentially violent, a threat, some kind of danger to the community. When we're in this boxing club, we're sitting in the circle, and this guy's, he's helping this little girl work on her jab and her straight. And then he's over here cheering everyone on when they're running their laps. Like these are human beings who have had
yeah,
struggles, have had obstacles that they've had to overcome, and they're not perfect, just like we're not perfect, but not putting judgment on the way that they move and just like you said, listening to what it is that they have to offer, giving them space to open up so that they can show who they
yeah,
truly are, drop the guard. I think that's something else that I know Leslie's dropping in here. Yeah, just being present, showing who you are, being yourself, giving people permission to be themselves. And that sets a model for when we're interacting with people
yeah.
in our day to day.
And you said it's something really important, dropping the guard. right? Which is something that I practice as much as I can, dropping the guard. Yesterday, I dropped the guard, dude. I was crying yesterday. I was crying because I was overwhelmed. And I was like, I was driving and my mom was, I had to take her. She had to go to the cancer hospital to check if she had cancer. And she's good. Her cancer's in remission. And that's a wonderful news, right?
Mhm.
And then I was on my way. I was on my way to drop her off at my house, and I started crying, dude. I was crying, and my mom was like, "¿Qué tienes, mijo?" I was like, "Dude, I just gotta get some stuff out, you know, and drop my guard and allow myself to cry." I was in tears. I put some of these lentes. I was driving, dude. And I was like, I could feel my tears going down. But you know what I started feeling after? I started feeling a little better, man.
Mhm.
You know, and I was realizing sometimes, this is where grief. I'm learning this from different people. I learned this from my partner Rosa too. She said, she's like, dude, a lot of trauma is stored in our body, right? It's stored in our hips, it's stored in our neck, it's stored in our shoulders,
Mhm.
it's stored in our minds, it's stored in our back. And I have a lot of trauma in my hips, right? Like I've had hip issues, and it makes perfect sense because of the stuff that I've experienced in my life, you know? So now that the whole drop down concept, right? Dropping the guard. When I was with the fathers coming out of with the fathers, and the program that I was with is called it was San Diego Dad's Corps. That's what the program was from Say San Diego. Um, Teaching men, reflecting with men to drop their guard. You
Mhm.
got these men coming out of prison, bro. They're like, where are my kids? I haven't seen my kids in 16 years. My baby mama took them. They got so much anger, so much to they want to feel heard, right? But they want to also live. They also want to feel like they're seen by society. And I'm over here like, dude, I come in here, right? And this is a true story, dude. This is a true story. Uh, I walk in and this guy was like, man, what are you gonna teach me? He was like, man, I just want my kids back. I want my kids back, man. Baby mama there, he was angry at the mujer that he was hurt by. And I was like, bro, it's not about you. I told him in front of everybody, it's not about you, bro. I was like, what you mean it's not about you? It's not about you getting your kids back. It's about your kids getting you back, you know? And what does that mean? It means in order for the kids to get you back, you got to be present. You have to have the moral courage to learn and unlearn why you are in the first why you ended up in the first place. And I read this quote, and I'll say it with you guys, and I'm gonna teach this soon too as well. It's like I read this. It said someday your kids are gonna figure you out. I promise you they will. The type of parent that you are, the type of spouse that you are, the type of teacher, the type of educator, the type of lover, how you treat other people, how much effort you put into them. Your kids are gonna either look at you to be someone they look up to, or they're gonna want to be someone they never want to be like, you know? So
Mhm.
we have to be conscious of how they always remember, like the way that I remember what my dad did to me, but I also remember the good stuff. The way that my dad, even certain teachers, right? Mr. Ketchum from middle school, right? Like certain people in my life that I'm like, I want to be like that person. I want to be inspirational like that person. I want to support the community like that person. But what does it take? It takes access for us to have people around us so we can be inspired by them. And it wasn't until I saw someone that looked like me and someone that had the same similar story. And this is where stories are so powerful. I found a community, bro. I found different communities that have the similar stories as me, and I didn't feel alone anymore, you know?
Mhm. I think that note on the fact that our kids are gonna figure us out. I know again, Leslie and I have been talking about this a couple times because she's spoken with my mom. My mom's living in Mexico right now, and so we call her every now and then. And then I've met her family, and we talk a lot about how we analyze our parents as adults, and we think our kids aren't going to do the same thing, or the kids that aren't
Yeah.
aren't doing the same thing right now currently. So just talking about how I remember I had a conversation with my son where he was talking about how he remembers whether I don't know how accurate it is or not, but he says he remembers being in the womb and he remembers the day he was born. And
Wow.
so I'm thinking back, like I know for myself, I don't have any clear memories before the age of 5. But to know that my boy's he's keeping a record of everything from the time he was born to today. He's 9 years old. And then I have those
Wow.
moments where I look back and I'm like, what are those memories he's storing right now? What are the
Yeah.
memories he's operating off of that I've given him? to work off of.
And that's special. And that's special because you're doing something that maybe your dad didn't do, or maybe my dad didn't do. You're protecting his story. You're allowing his story to continue. You're like, okay, that's chapter one. How do I help my son go to chapter two? How do I
Hmm.
go to chapter three? You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
that's good that you're doing that. I'm glad that you're conscious of that, because not a lot of fathers are conscious of that. We're not conscious of how our kids learn and how they watch us. Dude, I underestimate my kids, how smart they are, dude. Dude, do you remember when we were kids and you would watch your parents and play, and you would sense their energy when they were sad. You would sense their energy if they were like down, you know? And being kids, you don't really have the power to help them, but just maybe give them a hug, you know? And so I revisited that recently. I hadn't I went, my mom was sleeping in her bed. My mom lives with me right now. She lives with me because she got a stroke and she lost her home. And so she moved in with me. And so I went 2 days ago. Andaba bien agüitado, dude. And all I needed, dude, and you know what made me feel better? I just went over, dude, and I went like this, dude, next to her bed, dude, and I laid down next to her. And you know what she told me? She's like, Mijo, you haven't done that in a long time. He's like, and she hugged me, dude. And I was like, dude, sometimes we forget that we just need to hug our parents, dude. And now what I mean by that is, what I was trying to say is, we need to learn to forgive our parents too, dude. We gotta forgive them. My dad did some crazy stuff. I'm not gonna lie. He did some stuff he shouldn't have done, dude. He was not he was struggling with his inner child. So like, but it wasn't until recently until I finally forgave him. And because I forgave him, I was able to be happier.
Hmm. Yeah, man. About like going up to your mom. Again, that's something that we talk about all the time with our kids. My boy's 9 years old, but every now and then he'll still come up into bed and like, "Hey, can I cuddle with you tonight? You wanna?" I'm like, "Hey, come through." Because one day he might not. One day he might say, "I'm good," and you're gonna miss those times. So the fact that you're a grown man with your own kids and you're going up to your mom like, "Let me get a little time cuddling up." Hey, that's good. I would, again, my mom's in Mexico. I wish I could pull up and just give her a hug right now, but you know, flights ain't cheap these days.
It's because we forget, bro. We forget we're gonna die, bro. Like, so
Yeah.
like we forget that that reality that we're not gonna be here forever. Like, I'm 37, bro, and I'm I'm no, the first thing I learned when you start feeling old, or the concept of aging, is your joints. That's it. Like, and you start certain things, right? Like not going out, right? Like, dude, we're headed in that direction. We're gonna be elders as well. Like we forget that we're mortal. Like, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it's just it's I think the concept of remembering and reflecting will remind us of where we're going. You
Yeah.
know?
I did also want to mention, because you mentioned the importance of forgiving our parents. Something that Leslie and I talk about is not necessarily forgiving, which if you can forgive, great. If you can forgive people and repair that, do that, right? If that's what you're comfortable with, if that's what you're
If you
able.
can, yeah. If you can, if you can,
We want to recognize there are certain instances where sometimes it is best to just set a boundary and protect your own
yes, yes,
sovereignty, and recognize that that person's got healing work to do. They may not be ready to do that healing work, and you get to choose whether or not you want to be
yes.
on that path with them or not.
That's another lesson that I've recently learned too. Is like, una cosa is like, you don't need their validation to forgive yourself. You need to forgive yourself first as well, right? And learning to let go, because if you don't let go, hold on, let me put the charger on because my charger is disconnecting.
Yeah.
But the charge is, I feel like boundaries are really important. This is another thing that we haven't, men, sometimes fathers struggle with: people pleasing tactics, uh lack of boundaries, lack of boundaries.
Mhm.
I suck at some of my boundaries suck. Like, I recently fell in love, like, hard, right? And I realized, man, cuando me meto, when I fall in love, dude, like, I go in hard, and like, I had forgotten about myself. I was like, whoa, I'm so into it, you know, I'm so into this person that people often forget about about themselves. So you're right. We have to have heavy boundaries. And when I acknowledged that concept, I was able to love myself better and therefore love this other person better, right? So like you're right. You not it's not for everybody, but because there's some stuff that your parents, it's unforgivable. I don't know what you experienced, but there's some stuff, but you still have to forgive yourself. I still There's some stuff I haven't let go that my mom did to me when I was a kid, you know, and I have to work on that too. Dude, I'm not gonna lie, dude. She's probably gonna watch this video later and she's gonna be like, a ver, mijo, siéntate. A ver, I heard you say that on the live. A ver, what do you gotta let go of? I gotta do the work too. I'm like, okay, am I? You know, so it's true, dude. It's true.
No, that's yeah. And again, I mentioned that because we recently had a conversation this year with comedian Willie Barcena. And he talks, if you check out some of his comedy, he digs into some of these topics about, growing up with abusive household and things like that. And he talked about how for years his mom was incredibly abusive to him. For little things, he talked about how he wanted to play little league and she didn't want him to. And so when she found out he would go play little league, she just wailed on him, right? And so for years he
Mm.
was trying to repair that relationship, but he saw that she was just really set in her ways and wasn't going to be kind of moving in the direction he wanted to. So he just had to make that decision like, all right, I have things I need to focus on. I got a family that is counting on me to be present. If I'm staying locked into this cycle of trying to heal somebody who doesn't want that for themselves.
You're gonna burn out.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, again, I wish we had another hour here. We got another a couple minutes here, but I see a couple of questions in the chat and also in the Q&A. So I wanted to just take a minute for some folks. If you have any questions, again, please drop it in the Q&A section. I see Juan Ramirez posed a question here, so maybe we could start with this one here. He says, thanks for holding space and everybody here for your presence. Beautiful to hear your story, Jorge. As an RJ, restorative justice practitioner, when you see your kids are going through it, how are you holding space for them? What does that look like? How does that restorative convo move them forward? So applying restorative justice practices in the home, what's that look like for you?
Bro, that was a okay. That I'm not gonna I'm gonna be real about this one. When I got the job as a restorative justice practitioner, I was going around helping a lot of kids. I was going around helping a lot of people. I was going around like, ooh, like um a part of me realized that I was also compensating for what I might not be doing at home with my own kids. And so finally I realized that a couple months later, I was like, ya estaba metido, I was immersed, I was like doing work, and I saw the product of the stuff that I was oh, this is working, oh, this is working. My theoretical approach in restorative justice is working. My theory works. Oh, wow. I'm like, and then I look back and I had this moment. I was like, why the hell didn't I why am I having a hard time applying that theory in my home? And I started feeling ashamed because I realized I was immersing myself so much in with certain other people's stories when I'm like, man, I gotta do this work at home too. I gotta do circular work at home too. I can't just go out and preach. You know what I mean? I don't, and I mentioned this on the phone call with you a few weeks ago. I said to you, I was like, man, we got to check ourselves when we walk into our savior complex in any position, and as an RJ practitioner, like, dude, you see the fruits of your labor. You're like, whoa, it works, and now you got to make that work at home too, man. So like, I am in that journey right now, trying to figure it out. I really am, and it's not always the best, but like, because my kids are very strong-minded people, and that's the irony. I have to teach them to be strong-minded people. So guess what they are? They're strong-minded towards me. They practice their boundaries towards me. They practice their intensity towards me. And I have to be humble, dude. And I gotta be quiet. And I gotta listen. Yesterday, dude. Yesterday, I was in a really difficult space. You know who came to my help, man? My 19-year-old daughter, dude. She gave me the craziest wisdom. I was sitting on the ground. Aquí estaba en mi cuarto, right? Sitting on the ground. And I was like, just down, where I was super down, dude. I was like, man, it was a tough day yesterday. I'm not gonna lie. And my daughter came to me. She's like, Dad, like, you gotta let that go. You gotta let that grief go. You have to forgive yourself. And I was like, what? Like, I was so amazed because I realized I don't gotta look too far for the wisdom. Honestly, dude, like you said, sometimes the wisdom is right next door. Sometimes the wisdom is right inside of our home, and we forget to watch and pay attention. My son is teaching me about myself more than I've ever realized because I'm revisiting what it was like to see my dad grow up when I was his son at that age. My daughter, my 15-year-old daughter too, she's in a relationship right now, and I see the way that she loves at her age, dating,
Hmm.
and then my 19-year-old, the way she's determined, and I'm like, man, I'm doing something right, dude. I'm doing something right. But the wisdom is in this house. So that's when I was like, okay, I got to revisit this RJ work and I got to apply it at home, you know? And so, pero it's not perfect. And I just have to be honest that I'm not perfect. And I just got to I have to be okay with that, dude, you know? So I don't
Hmm.
know if that makes sense with your question.
Yeah, I think that note of sometimes people will follow pages like Latinx Parenting or other parenting pages and look at the people who are the face and think, oh, they got it down. They no stress. They probably have kids who just listen to every word they say because they're so happy and everyone respects each other in the house. Like, no, people ain't perfect. We try to practice what we're preaching, but sometimes you need a little help. Sometimes you need some reminders. Sometimes our kids will serve as that mirror and say, are you really
There
living
it
up?
is.
Are you really living up
There it
to
is.
what Leslie was dropping here in the chat? Like there's platitudes and then there's walking the walk. Are we just going to
Yes.
talk about the importance of the work that we do, or are we going to demonstrate it? So I think that notion too of just anyone who's here watching who feels like, I'm here to learn to be some kind of super parent. Like there's no super parents. We're working to improve ourselves and working to make sure that we have that healthy and loving relationship with our kids, but everyone's going to have moments where they need a little extra support and a reminder that you're human and you're going to make mistakes, forgive yourself and move forward, as best you can.
Let me say one more thing, something that I love to ask, and I'm curious to see in the chat how many people will be able to answer this question. Because it's this concept of fatherhood and this concept of being present, right? Sometimes as a father, I feel like, I could be an unstoppable force. I feel like in certain parts of my life, I can keep going, right? And there's certain parts of my life, I'm an immovable object. I'm like, I don't want to, I just want to do what I think is right. And so I'm gonna ask everybody in the chat, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, right? And think about fatherhood. Think about like parenting, right? Think about the dynamics between like you and mom, right? Like their parents. Like how did you have an unstoppable force at home and an immovable object. How do you work out an ideological conflict like that, right?
Mhm.
And your kids witness this, right? Your kids are witnessing this ideological conflict, right? So what needs to happen? You have to surrender to each other. You have to surrender to each other.
Mhm.
And that's when I realized that, dude, I was like, damn, I got a lot more work to do. That's really what it was. It's ongoing, dude. I'm always going to be a student, you know?
Mhm.
I'm always going to be a student.
Yeah, the surrender to each other, recognizing that in any relationship, you're not always going to get your way. And sometimes that's a good thing because maybe your way is being inconsiderate of what other people might need. And so you need a reminder. You need to have someone who can check you on a compassionate, respectful plane where I see you, you see me. And I'm not your enemy, you're not my enemy, but we have something that we're trying to resolve here.
Yes,
How can we resolve that? All right.
exactly.
So, all right, I know we're kind of running out of time here. I just wanted to, again, if there's anyone in the chat that would like to ask anything before we wrap up here, but if not, just any final words, while we got you here, Jorge, anything you want to share with the community? What's your call to action here? What is it that you hope people take away from our conversation here more than anything?
Allow yourself to learn from other people's stories, dude. Allow yourself to learn from other people's stories. Just relax, just listen, and like, you'll be surprised how much knowledge there is out there for yourself. There's a lot of mirrors. There's people that are like mirrors for you, right? They show you who you really are, and lean on them, right? Lean on those individuals. And I do feel like that's where I feel like the healing can start, at least in parts of my life. But just also resting. Something that I need to learn how to do more is rest.
Mhm. Thank you, Jorge. And Leslie dropping in here. Also, where can people find you? So if you want to drop your handles, whether that's social media, YouTube, your organization, and how can people support the work that you're trying to do to bring this work to people in your space?
I mean, on Instagram, I'm at Reality Changers, Reality Changers. Um, on YouTube, I'm not really active, like I said, on YouTube, but just look up like Jorge Narvaez and at Reality Changers. Honestly, I mean, if anyone, I mean, for me, like I love supporting people. If anybody here is in San Diego, that like need support with like restorative work in spaces, like you know, let me know how I can support you. You know how we can support each other because there's a lot of need out there, man. There's a lot of need. There's more parents, more and more kids, more and more parents feeling disenfranchised
Hmm.
and feeling like lost, man. And they get lost in the sauce. And I just feel like if I could support people in a way where I can help them be present, or they can teach me something, I'm down. So
Yeah, and that's something else that we really hope people take away from these conversations is the importance of finding your community, whether that's online, whether that's on the ground, whether that's your neighborhood. I see Leslie dropping here asking if we could do a double date.
I'm down, dude. I'm
We'll make
down.
some time. Next time we head to San Diego. We were at Chicano Park a couple weeks ago, just taking a lap. And then last thing, oh yeah, I did just want to say again, thank you for everyone who came on today. Just a reminder that we have more guests this month, next Saturday, the Saturday after that, and the Saturday after that. So if you want to check into those conversations, please just check your email, make sure you register, make sure that you're following our page when we send updates to let you know when the conversations are going to be happening. But again, just thank you, Jorge, for coming on here, sharing your story, talking about the work that you're trying to do. And, we'll stay in touch. We'll be
Yeah.
sure to share your stuff on our page as well.
Igualmente, man. You guys keep up the good work as well, and take care of each other. Take care of yourselves, and keep going. Keep going. I think there's so much work to do. You know, so um, yeah.
Yeah. All right, beautiful. Well, thank you, and we'll see you soon. All right. And I don't know if we're still recording here, but me and the team are gonna be wrapping up. Jorge, yeah, of course you're invited to jump in there. But for everybody else, thank you for joining us. And Leslie Valeria, what's the protocols here? This is my first time doing the virtuals.
Nothing. We just end. Great
Okay.
work, both of you. Beautiful. Yeah, there's